So thank you very much. Wanted to do a presentation on the Scout Brigade of Fort George. And the Scout Brigade of Fort George has meant an awful lot to me. I joined it back in 1994, 95, and have been participating in it for basically the last 26 years. It's an interesting event as it is currently the longest international event, annual international event that we have with the BS of A. You'll see that I'm actually a little bit of a historian, and I'm also a reenactor. So that's actually me firing my brown bess as portraying one of the Royal Newfoundland regiments from the War of 1812. Blue uniform on the other side is my role for a long time with the Scout Brigade of Fort George, as I was sort of the adjutant general in charge of all the administration. And basically for a scout camp, that meant registration, all the sort of the little things that you would get with the camp. And we gave out an awful lot of stuff for the camp. We'll get into that right now. Prior to that, though, I need to give you a little bit of history on how we see the War of 1812, which is just a little different than how you folks see it down in the South. If you talk about the War of 1812 with our American neighbors, Johnny Horton will come up with the Battle of New Orleans, the Creek Wars, burning the White House, and that's about it for the most part. In Canada, it means an awful lot more. So the War of 1812 some way starts with, and I'm pushing this a little bit because I know we have friends from South Carolina and North Carolina, is John C. Calhoun from South Carolina and Henry Clay from Kentucky were sort of leaders of the War Hawks in the 12th Congress. They had about a dozen to 2 dozen members who thought that, you know, they really needed to kick the British out of North America because we were just causing too much problems. And we were. You have to remember the War of 1812 is occurring at the time where the Napoleonic War is occurring. There's a British naval blockade of all of the French ports, which happened to be one of your major allies during the American Revolution, as one of your larger trading partners. British were also taking all your sailors from your ships. If they were seen to have been a British sailor at any time in their life, they were being actually removed from the ships. The British were being blamed for native insurrections along the frontier. The Manifest Destiny was sort of that part, and it was seen as the second battle of U.S. independence. So the U.S. Congress declares war June 8, 1812, and yes, you guys declared war. It wasn't the British or anything along that lines. And the war lasted from 1812 to about 1814. Actually, it lasted about 1815, June of 1815. However, the peace had been declared at the Treaty of Ghent in 1814. An awful lot of our mythology comes out of the War of 1812. Let's face facts, you're 10 times bigger than us. And at the end of the war, everybody went back to the original boundary lines. And so it was sort of a war fought for almost nothing. We have Isaac Brock here in Canada, which had lines like "Push on, brave York volunteers." He was our sort of our Superman. He takes over Detroit at the Battle of Detroit without firing one shot. He just marches natives in a circle around the front entrance. So it looks like there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of natives, when actually it turned out to be about 200. He just had them marching in a circle. The commander of Detroit decided that he was going to be massacred. And so he just put up the white flag and said, "We're done," and walked out. So he was basically our savior, except for the first battle that he is in on Canadian soil when the New York militia attack at the Battle of Queenston Heights. He dies, as well as 2 other commanding officers. So it doesn't start off as a good sign for the Canadians. James Lawrence, who is the commander of the Shannon, basically he gives us "Don't give up the ship," which later is used in Perry's discussion at the sort of the Battle of Lake Erie. This one's important, and we'll explain why it's important. Zebulon Pike, he actually was the first person to have climbed Pikes Peak in the continental United States, your largest mountain, or highest mountain in the continental United States. He was the first one to make that ascent. He's also commanding of the U.S. forces who attack York April 27th, 1813. Huge force comes across into Lake Ontario, comes in at just the west side of York, later to be called Toronto. They come in on force. The British soldiers look at this and go, "Yeah, this is not going to be a good fight." They proceed to withdraw, but what they do is they actually set up the blockhouse for the powder magazine, they set a fuse into it. And as Zebulon Pike makes his way into the fort, the whole fort blows up and he dies. Why this is important is because this is why we burnt the White House. Because Zebulon Pike was killed in this battle, the Americans felt that we had done something wrong, and they proceed to basically torch all of York, and they torch Newark, which is later Niagara-on-the-Lake. And so the actual burning of cities begins with the burning of York. And later on in the war in 1813, 1814, as the British soldiers go all down the south side of Lake Ontario, they burn everything from Sackett's Harbor all the way down to Black Rock, which is later Buffalo. And when they find the White House, they actually set it on fire as well, too. Battle of New Orleans is 1815. Again, a whole month after the war has been over. And just a couple of things that occurred is Thomas Jefferson, as it was very much an affair of both parties agreed upon, said that taking over Canada would be a mere matter of marching. This is where the map is, and I'm just going to show you, this is where we are for most part. And this is why it's so important in Southern Ontario, because we have all of these forts that were built during the Battle of the War of 1812. You'll see other battles along the coast and then down here in Louisiana as well, too. The ones down in Mississippi were called the Creek Wars. And then it did get a little far out here as well, too. But these are most of the battles during the War of 1812. And again, we are blessed with all these forts that were built. Fort Malden, just outside of Windsor, Fort Detroit, Fort Mackinac, which is in Upper Michigan, Fort Erie, which is in Fort Erie, Ontario, Fort Niagara, which is the French fort that the British owned, that the Americans took, and then it was given back to the British, and then it was given back to the Americans. Fort George, which is in Newark, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Fort York, which is in Toronto, Fort Wellington, Prescott, and Fort Henry in Kingston. So most of the battles that are occurring in this Southern Ontario area. Again, the U.S. don't see this as much of a battle. It's a skirmish at most. In Canada, it becomes our myth. The militia fought back the mighty Americans. Laura Secord and the Cow. And we'll go into a long story of that on another day. And the 49th parallel becomes our border in 1818 with the United States. And nothing really starts happening, and everything's forgotten for 100 years, except we have this myth here in Canada, which we keep recreating, that, it was these brilliant volunteers who helped save the country, Canada, from the American invaders. Things start happening in 1913 when we start taking a look at all those forts which had been sort of left to rot, fall apart, and they start taking a look at them and making more of historical significance out of them. Battlefield House in Stony Creek is one of the first ones. During the Great Depression is when we really kick in on rebuilding all the forts as we make them public work projects. Fort Henry, Fort George, Fort Erie, Fort Niagara are all rebuilt by Ronald Way, a University of Queens professor and engineer. Fort York, City of Toronto, was built in 1934-39, and it's what we have to this day. This is a huge impact on scouting because an awful lot of these youth who fought in World War II come back and become our leaders. And so you start seeing all of our badges, start seeing some of that significance. You see these are all district badges that you're seeing right now. Battlefields region is in Hamilton, Niagara-on-the-Lake. Fort York is out of Toronto. Grenadier is out of Toronto. York Summit's out of Toronto. Kingston District, that's a Martello Tower, which is a fighting structure. It's better shown in the Loyalist area scouting badge. You can see that tower. Rideau Lakes is a blockhouse. York, that's an original picture design of what York looked like at the Battle of York. And York Garrison, making sure we protect the War of 1812. So what happens? Well, Scout Brigade of Fort George, and it has a great history. If you want some more information on it, the Boys Life magazine of August 2014, the Canadian Scouting Life of 2013, all had huge publications and articles about the Scout Brigade of Fort George. It was the centennial or bicentennial of the battles, so there was an awful lot of hoopla about it. And even this one, and I think some of you might know this magazine, this was Review 22 for the Institute of Scouting. They actually did an article in the 1990s. This was a small historical run, and it's out of the United States, but they had the articles on the War of 1812 as well as the Scout Brigade of Fort George. And it always had a great title for King and Country and a pound of fudge, because we always gave the kids fudge for participating in the event. We have great websites and Facebook sites. There's a video on YouTube in regards to the Boys Life magazine article if you want some more information after tonight. So the beginnings of the camp, we started using Fort York as a site for camps in the 1950s. They were really nice to Scouts in Canada. We kept on using the events. Here are some great patches that show that transition. Fort York in 1973, Niagara District in Fort George, 73, 75. The one that's undated is from 78. And then it starts creating basically every 2 years, we're holding an event at Fort York. So in 1980, we hold an event. 1982, we hold an event at Fort York. And then 1984, we hold an event, the Boy Scout Weekend. This is the beginning of the Scout Brigade of Fort George. In 1984, in the spring of 1984, they hold an event at Fort York. And you'll see the 82 contingent, the 84 contingent, and the 86 contingent. Well, as good Scouters, there became two factions of Scouters. One who thought they liked the way the camp was being run, and one who didn't like the way the camp was being run. And so in 1984, they actually split. And so in 1984, the Toronto groups moved down to Fort George, became a bit of a political hot potato, just like the war itself, but they came down to 84. Fort York only lasted 2 years after that, and Fort George became the annual camp. You'll see Niagara on the Lake. It was held at Fort George. Boy Scout Weekend, R&R. R&R starts for Royal Newfoundland Regiment. This is the first badge for Fort George. We kept on going with that same design, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, just with different colors. So those in the northern areas, you probably might see these badges from time to time at your traderies and camps. These are the first sort of 7 badges of that era. That takes us up to about 1990. No major changes, just color variations. It's not a very exciting badge. It was just, at this time, just an event badge. We did make one change. We changed it to Ontario, Niagara on the Lake, Ontario, because we were tired of trying to explain what R&R meant to Scouts. In 1991 was the last one, Scout Campaign. In 1992, we added some more writing because we're Scouters. And we still call it Boy Scout Campaign because at this point in time, we are still Boy Scouts Canada, but by this time, we're actually getting involving women and girls into the Scouts. In Ventures, we had already had them since 68 as a co-ed movement. Scouting begins a program that we're actually inviting young girls to participate. We changed the camp name from Heritage 94 Jamboree to Heritage 95, and we had Camp Anderson. Don Anderson was one of the leaders and one of the founders of the Scout Camp. He passed away in 1994, and so to honor him, they felt that putting his name and renaming the camp as Camp Anderson would be a nice fitting tribute for him. We then make them bigger still, and we start using an awful lot more embroidery. These become almost 5.5, 6 inches large. The colors are really cool. This red one right here, which is Camp Anderson, Heritage Camp 2001. You have to remember that this camp is held on the 3rd weekend of September. In 2001, on Tuesday, September the 11th, borders get shut down between Canada and the United States. The Scouts were allowed to come across and actually still participate in the camp. It's one of the most heart-wrenching moments I've ever had at a camp where we were dealing with youth from the American side who just wanted to be Scouts. And it was one of the most heartbreaking and rewarding camps I've ever met. The Canadian Scouts, without being prompted, created 2 lines, an honor guard, and allowed the American troops to march through. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house that day. We participated, we kept on going, and we made different events. The 2012 was the 50th anniversary of the Queen on the throne. The 2005 badge at the bottom here in the black also was a commemoration of the 55 Jamboree, the 50th anniversary. And then, like all good Scouters, the 2007 was our 100th anniversary of Scouting. And so the camp chief at the time, who wasn't me, decided he would do 2 colors, but only do 5 in one color and then 2,000 in the other color. So as far as I know, the green ones are not the normal one. There's only about 3 in existence that I'm aware of. And then the same thing happened on the bottom silver ones the year later. He only made 3, I believe, of the red. So Keep your eye on those because there are two variations. One has about 2,500, the other is like 3. Then in 25th anniversary of our camp in 2009, and then in 2010, we commemorated the 100th anniversary of the BSA using the eagle on the front of the badge. That badge to this day is probably one of my favorites in these designs because it's absolutely phenomenal in the look of it. So is this the last of this design? So the story will continue. CSPs come to Canada. So this is when I start taking over the badge design, and this is my creation. And so this was our 5-year commemoration of the actual War of 1812. This is the 200th centennial, 200th bicentennial. So the first one in 2011 was James Madison and King George. In 2012, it's William Hull, who's the American commander in New York State. Isaac Brock, Laura Secord. I told you we'd be talking about her again with the cow. She becomes our Canadian chocolate manufacturer. Tecumseh, our Canadian native, who helped us in the London campaigns or the Battle of the Thames. Oliver Perry and James Yeo, who actually had the Battle of Fort Erie on the navals. And then Andrew Jackson in 2015 and George Drummond. Andrew Jackson becomes your president. George Drummond becomes one of our leaders of Upper Canada at the time. You'll see that in this first set, the British soldier has blue collars and the American soldier is in green. That was a manufacturing error. It was supposed to be Navy, but however, the 3rd Division of the U.S. regiment wore green tunics, so we just went with it anyways. The coin in the center is the Upper Canada Preserved coin, and it has the 2011. So in 2012, which is this one, it changes to 2012. The soldier is in blue, and there's green facings on the soldier here. In 2013, we made a medal for James Madison. I don't know why, but we did. It was a good idea. And so we actually gave out medals to all the participants with this James Madison picture on it with the Scout Brigade of Fort George. At the end of the event in 2015, we actually created the Upper Canada Preserved Medal, and this was presented to every single youth and participant at the Scout Brigade of Fort George. In 2016, 2017, I no longer was camp chief, and we let the youth decide what the badges were going to look like, and these were the 2 designs that came out of the youth's idea. So the one is the fort, done in gold on gold on the green, and then in 2017, which is the 150th anniversary of Canada, we have a little toy soldier with the British flag. That was the youth involvement. It came back to the adults again in 2018. They went back to that design again, 2019, and in 2019 we also had an ambassador program. This badge on the bottom was given out to any scout who was seen as doing something good at the camp. Because of COVID, the first one in 2020 with the British soldier wearing a mask was created. This badge was created a year and a half ago. We thought we would be out of the lockdown. The 2021 was going to show that we're out of the lockdown. And then the third one on the bottom, which ties the people together, says Scouts salute those who kept 2020 from completely getting away from us. We have held this event virtually for the last 2 years, and so these have been the camp crests for the virtual camps. We also ran a winter camp, which is a little different, is that the scouts would actually sleep in the barracks at Fort George. And so these are the first 4 from the 1903, 94, 95, missing 96, but it was in the same design. And then in 98, down here, we changed the design. In 98, that was the last year for the winter camp up until 2005. So it went on a 7-year hiatus. And the reason it went on a hiatus was in 1998, women were allowed as scouters and women were allowed in scouts. And the scout leaders at the time didn't want to deal with it, so they just canceled the event. And so in 2005, it was re-brought up with the understanding that we can still manage to have a camp, even though it was in a blockhouse. We just figured out how to make sure that we had separate quarters for the girls and the boys, and we've been running it ever since. These are some of the nicer designs. This is the red one from 2009. You'll see the eagle from 2010 in the winter. All the winters in this series after the 2008 were all done as white backgrounds to symbolize the winter camps. In 2011 to 2017, we created forts that actually surrounded the same design as we did for the summer camps. So if a youth went to 2 winter camps and 3 summer camps, he could have the whole crest or make a whole crest if he wanted to. In 2015, we finished that design, except the winter camp guys, for lack of want or lack of trying, just kept with the design and created 2016 and 2017 with that same design. But these are all the same, our forts. So Fort Niagara, Fort York, Fort Henry, actually I think Fort McHenry is here, Fort George, Fort Mackinac, Fort Niagara, and then the campaign of Lake Erie. Since that point, the 2018 went back to that sort of like oval one, 2019 went to a CSP style. We were very inexpensive for the 2020 style, and then the virtual winter campaign went on, so we have a British soldier watching it by a computer screen. And that's currently where we're sitting at with the actual events. But again, we're scout leaders, so hey, what the heck? We can make more badges. So these are all the chenilles that we made. These were $20 badges at the time, probably now $30. They were flocked as jacket or camp jacket badges. And so here's a wide selection. We stopped with the actual 2010 one. Again, the flocking is just in the center here, as well as just on the edges. So if you see these raised flocking badges, these are the chenilles from the camp, usually sold to the scouters for $20 a piece and trying to make some money for the camp. You'll probably see some of these kicking around if you're at scout camps. And these are the actual Shako plates and crossbelt plates we make for the youth to create their uniforms. So these are the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. That's their crossbelt. That's their Shako plate, King's 8. We've changed them over the years. So those of us who like varieties, we try to collect the varieties. The 49th Regiment, artillery, crossbelt. There is no crossbelt for the CRF. CRF is the Canadian Regiment of Fencible Infantry. It was a militia infantry made up of Canadians during the War of 1812. And that's our Cub program. We've instituted a Cub program now as well, too, for this. This is the U.S. Infantry 6th Regiment. And here's a young lad who's actually made his own hat. This is a baseball cap, a black baseball cap with an actual rounded tube put on top of it with some nice lacing and the actual badge glued to the front of the hat. And that's how most of the hats are made, both the British soldiers and the American soldiers. And we make stuff as well too. These are some camp badges that we've made. This is a trivet plate that we made. The one down here, Bruce Sellers, who passed away in 2005, we made a gone home badge for him. One of the groups I met the Ghost Tours, which we run as well too. And this is the 50th anniversary badge for the 1955 Jamboree. It looks very similar to the 55. This is twill, it's not a silk, and it says 50 years, 2005, not to be confused with the 55 badge itself. And then you're going to see all types of stuff. We made pins. A reason the pins were made was that if you started in 84, you would wear an 84 in whatever year currently. And if you had one with a circle, that was your first year. If you didn't have a circle, we make things complicated. We made pennants for it. This is my banner here for years that I used to bring. These little square badges were used on knapsacks. This is a camp badge that's set that has the Royal Newfoundland Soldier in all of the current regiments. And we've been doing this event, and other groups and other regions and other areas have tried to tie in themselves as well too. So quite a few of these are the Niagara districts, Toronto. These are groups out of Haldimand, Norfolk. This one is out of Whitby, Fort Malden out of Amherstburg, Detroit. These are all Whitby camps and coveries and stuff that have used the design. Scope, which is one of, again, biannual event, which is used both the Scouts of Pennsylvania and the Scouts of Canada participate in this event every 2 years, and it's a we go down there, they come up, and this year, 2012, they used the War of 1812 design and some other camps and used it right up until one of our Canadian Jamborees and CJ, which this is the bottom one. Your Greater Niagara Frontier Council is the only other sort of council that really is involved in the War of 1812 to a major extent. This was their 2013 National Jamboree set. This coin is actually embedded in their major piece of the badge. This is the map badge on how to put it together. This was the full badge. This is a huge badge. It's about 14 inches, 16 inches tall. And that's the Order of the Arrow flap for that Jamboree as well too. And that's my presentation. And by the way, that's me on a tank on the battlefield that we used for the War of 1812, because the Lincoln militia continues to use that area as a training ground to this day. The Lincoln Welland militia go back to the War of 1812. And there's me in my finery in the War of 1812 uniform that I wear. Any questions?
How many people would have been there, let's say in 2005? How many people come there?
In 2005, we were basically 700 to 1,200. In 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, we were averaging about 3,500 for those years.
Beautiful.